So that's where my passion really lies. And that's what I spend my days doing is, building tools for the LPs to kind of do it. And then, kind of empowering the GPs on how to like, hey, if you kind of do this a bit differently, I think you'll get some better results. And all in the name of, greater transparency, I think, goes a long way.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Lance Pederson. He's co-founder at Passive Advantage, a creator of the Empire Builder formula, an extensive background in advising GPs and LPs. And we're going to dive in today into a number of things that cause friction often between GPs and LPs. I love some of the suggestions that he gave, because if you're a GP or LP, you're going to be better informed and be able to have a better operation, knowing a few of these things to expect in that partnership, right? And that's exactly what it is. So you're going to learn a lot from Lance in our conversation today. Lance, welcome back to the show. It's been a while since we have caught up on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Whitney.
Yeah, no, honored to have you and to catch up again and really to update and educate the listeners in many ways on what's happening with you and even you starting to help host some shows for the podcast or for the Real Estate Syndication Show. I'm excited about that personally, and just bringing your experience, expertise, to the listeners and to help educate our investors and operators that listen as well from your just experience, which we're going to dive into today in a number of ways. But I'm excited about that.
Yeah, me as well. Yeah, I'm super excited to be part of the team and yeah, hopefully bring some great guests and have some great content for everyone. And yeah, I mean, I love doing this stuff, so I couldn't be more excited.
Awesome. No, we're grateful again. And well, let's jump into some of your skill sets and why don't you update the listeners on like your focus right now, and then we're going to dive into, you have a vast experience of really coaching LPs and GPs, and we're going to talk about some of that maybe that friction that's there often in our industry, and how you've helped minimize a lot of that on both sides of that transaction, right? We'll say, or and dive into some of the things that you've been helping with. But first, give us a little update about yourself, maybe your focus right now.
Yeah, so I mean, for those of you who don't know me, like, so I was a principal at a real estate private equity firm. So we had pooled discretionary funds, and we're allocating capital into other sponsors around the country, into their deals and their funds. But we had an accidental business, which was what was called Verivest. And so ostensibly a real estate fund administration company. And what made it accidental was that as LPs in other people's deals, we realized that some sponsors really needed some help with the back office accounting stuff. And my first business was a service business in IT. We, took care of people's computer networks. So I had a lot of background just in running service businesses. But nonetheless, I mean, as a real estate fund administrator, I found myself, and as we built and grew that, I mean, when started at, like I said, it was accidental, started at kind of $0 of assets under administration and grew it to over 3 billion. It kind of took on a life of its own. But I really ended up realizing I had a lot of passion for kind of being the referee in the industry, so to speak, because when you're the administrator, my job is to make sure that everything's being done, that it's fair and equitable, right, between the passive investors, the LPs, and the GPs, that the GPs are doing what they should be doing. And so I ended up helping lots of guys architect their pooled investment funds, right, which is all about how do we create alignment in this vehicle so that it's fair to the investors. And, so basically every day of my life was just these scenarios and situations that come up from an accounting perspective, as to how do you handle these transactions and book them, and what you need to disclose, and what all those sorts of things. And so my passion became kind of just transparency in general, right? Just realizing that there needs to be far more transparency to the LPs in terms of what kind of information they have access to, because oftentimes that's a bit of the knock, right, on some of these deals, is that just they're a bit opaque, right? Investors can't really see into what they've invested in after they've invested. And so we ended up creating a kind of a sponsor due diligence verification service where we run background checks on sponsors. We'd verify their track records, and those all came out of just passions of like, how can we kind of remove some friction from the business, so it's easier for investors to get comfortable investing with people when they know that, hey, some independent third parties verified that. So with that said, what I'm doing today is I've moved on from Verivest, no longer involved, but I've kind of carried that torch where I spend most of my days still helping guys architect funds, the sponsors on that side, doing much the same I've done. And I partnered up with Dr. Sam Giordano, and we've created what's called, Passive Advantage. And so we're building tools for LPs to help kind of analyze deals. So when you get a deal from a sponsor, right, the ability to kind of plug it into a tool, have it highlight red, yellow, green, what are the areas that you need to focus on as you're conducting your own due diligence. And so I really have kind of straddled both sides of that, where I'm kind of teaching both sides, like, here's how you should, kind of look at this from the other person's perspective. And in both cases, I think some people, there's just things that could be done to kind of remove some of that friction, or what could be called kind of a bit of a dysfunctional sales process. So that's where my passion really lies. And that's what I spend my days doing, is, building tools for the LPs to kind of do it. And then, kind of empowering the GPs on how to, like, hey, if you kind of do this a bit differently, I think you'll get some better results. And all in the name of, greater transparency, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love the background, and even how you had a quote accidental business, right? That really took off, but then you realized that you loved being the referee, and now that yeah, and I think it's great that you are able to really focus on that now.
Yeah.
Like this thing that you figured out that, hey, I figured out I really love doing this, and now I want to just be all in there. I think it's a sweet spot to be in that a lot of people never get to be in. I feel like, or they just don't take the leap to do it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too just comes from when you've been on all sides of the table. It's just a bit easier to have empathy for the other side, right? Because, we were capital allocators, so ostensibly LPs ourselves. And so we had to develop our own processes and procedures for, conducting that kind of due diligence, because we didn't necessarily have control ourselves. So, you get really good at that. And then when you're kind of administrating in the middle and seeing all these dynamics that take place, and I won't call them funny business, but you just see a lot of times it's just ignorance driven, right? It's just that they don't know, they don't understand that, hey, they're real estate guys. They don't understand all the ins and outs of GAAP financials and accounting and all this other sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
ultimately it's super important. So I just think for me, I'm a bit of an enigma. I've just had a very, I've got 15 years of seat time, and I've sat in basically every role and every function within this. And so not everyone can say that. So it's not that there's nothing special about me per se, other than just having a bit of grit, show up every day. And I've just had a chance to kind of see more than other people have. And
Yeah,
so my perspective, therefore, it's just a different perspective that you wouldn't have if you hadn't done the things that I've done.
for sure. Well, let's jump into some of those ways that maybe you are focused on even empowering those GPs, right? And how how it's benefiting the LPs as well, and maybe some examples of how you've seen this, really the lack of transparency or standardization, like you and I were talking about in the industry, in ways you see that could be improved. Let's help. I think just talking through some of those things are going to help both sides of that transaction as well, right? The GPs and the LPs. I think I would love to know some of those. We want our LPs to be better informed, right? We want them to have what they need. We want to have that as readily available for them as we possibly can. And I think sometimes, like, we don't know what we don't know as far as what they would really like to see. We try to get that information from them, but it's not always extremely easy to know, like, if they have what they need. I guess in a very understandable way, things like that. But
Yeah,
could
I
you?
think that the big example that comes to my mind, right, is just from the GP's perspective, just the willingness to share all of the data and documentation that surround transactions with LPs, right? And by that I mean, if it's a syndicated deal, not being afraid to share the 5-year full pro forma that you've put together, that is basically the foundation of what your business plan is and what you expect to do. And not being willing to share that, the Excel file, so to speak, with investors who are interested. I'm not saying that you have to offer it to everybody, right? But if someone asks for it, right? Having a secure data room set up where you're like, here's a link to the information, feel free to review it. Obviously it's confidential. You can't go and share it with a bunch of other people. Like that's fine. That's reasonable. But to say that you won't share it, right? I mean, what's that saying to the LP?
Yeah.
That's sort of saying that you have something to hide, when more often than not, in speaking with, the GPs, is that it's just more of the fear that they don't want to spawn more questions. They don't want to,
Yeah.
they're fearful they're going to sit on the phone for hours and hours answering questions from someone who they would sort of deem as not nearly as sophisticated as they are. And I'm not saying that's not true, but I just think it's just being able to provide something like that as an example. And then even post-transaction, just allowing them to have access to the property level financials, the general ledger detail that shows everything that went in and out of the property, just as standard course, right? Like rather than once again having to have everyone sort of like think that they don't have a right to see it and
Yeah.
having to request it. It's just like, here it is. Just you can go look at it. There's communication strategies on the GP side that you can do it in a way that's not going to create more work for you.
Yeah.
And just most investors just knowing they have access to it is the comfort, right? And let's just face it. I mean, our attention spans are super short. So even when someone goes there and looks at it, they're more than likely will be overwhelmed in about 5 minutes. But just it just gives them peace, right? Knowing that at least they have access to it if they needed to.
Right. I could not agree more. Just about having the access. That just means a lot to them, even if they don't know what half of it means. It's good, but many of them do know. And many of them are. I mean, I just know I get really good questions from our investors often. I'm like, okay, you've been studying this, and have dove in here. But anyway, so a couple really quick things for the operators that are listening. What are some best practices you've seen around like that data room? Or is there a platform you've seen to be able to do that well, or or Google Drive, or like what's been the best way?
Yeah, I mean, it can be as simple as Google Drive or Dropbox. I myself have used the platform it's now owned by Dropbox called DocSend.
Mm.
Um, and it just has a bit more controlled access, right? So when someone goes to access the secure data room, and it's affordable, they have to register, and you can have them sign like a non-disclosure agreement. So some of the fears that people have, you can sort of, remove those concerns by, having them sign an NDA so that, they know they're not going to be disclosing this information. And then you also can just see who accessed it for how long, what did they download, that sort of thing. And
You
so
can see that.
yeah. So you see when they click on things, if they download something, you can watermark documents. It's not as fancy as like the full-blown data rooms that institutional investors use, but I think it's just a great platform. And that's where I can say, just speaking from experience, is that I've provided access to, DocSend to many investors, and it always kind of cracks me up. They're like, yeah, they want to see it. And then they go in and I see they downloaded like one thing or looked at it for 3 minutes and
Right.
left. So it just yeah, it's a great solution. And I think it puts their minds at ease. And the other things that I think that you put in the data room too is run a background check on yourself and the principals once a year, and just upload it to the data room, right? So it's like, we've got background checks, you want to see them, we're going to update them once a year. You can go and see, hey, they're running them on themselves, but it's like, it's better than nothing. Because a lot of investors, that's a question I got all the time was, I just don't feel like I could ask for that. And of course, it would be an administrative nightmare if everyone and their brother's asking to run a background check on you. But so just do it on yourself, right? And be willing to just share, even if it is what it is. I just think that ultimately, when it comes to the GP side, I just believe that your close rate will go up, right? So you want a higher close rate, then do these things, because when they get to the moment of truth and they're deciding whether they want to invest, these are the things that are flooding through their minds, the LP's minds,
Yeah.
right? Like, man, I don't know. I just met these guys. I'm not sure. And then that becomes a no. It's easy to say no, but you can turn that into a yes, where you're just like, listen, whatever you need to see, we've got it. And I also believe in like filling out a principal questionnaire that's sort of attesting that, hey, we're not bad actors. We've done these things. You sign it, you upload the principal questionnaire. It's like, you've got it all there. because those are the things that we as kind of pro LPs ourselves, I mean, that was the process we used. So my thinking is just why not share that with everybody?
Yeah. Now, is that questionnaire, where does that come from? How is that created? Is that just something you just have GPs create themselves?
Yeah, I mean, you can find like you can kind of Google principal questionnaire. There's templates. A lot of attorneys, securities attorneys, have probably had most GPs fill out a
Right.
principal questionnaire. So it's getting a hold of one won't be difficult. But like once again, it's kind of like the background check. Just hey, the attorney ran it. I know they ran it. I know the lenders run all these background checks, but it just sort of, in theory, it just puts their mind at ease. Just fill one out on your own and upload it, and there it is. And
Yeah.
I will say that that was the most commonly downloaded sort of things they would go and look for. They go to the background check and they go to the principal questionnaire.
Nice. No, that's good to know. And you mentioned a minute ago, an NDA, would you require, say, all investors to sign an NDA, or is that part of the process of them, logging into the DocSend system, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I just put it if you're going to access the secure data room where I'm providing everything to you, then sign an NDA at that point. I mean, if I just gave you the PPM and the OM and that stuff, like it's probably gated behind like the investor portal, piece where they can get access to that. And of course, I would put the PPM and the operating agreement and those things in the data room as well. But yeah, so you have the NDAs when they're signing up to access it. And that way you just know, because if you're putting up your closing statements and on deals and your track record and the returns and the more things you can put in there, I mean, some of that stuff you don't want them just sending it out willy-nilly to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've wondered at times about making it where they can't download it. It's like you can view it all right here, but you can't download it ultimately, just so they can't, anybody can't come in and send it to anywhere. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on that is that the NDA sort of solves that problem, right? So it just becomes, hey, you just signed a non-disclosure agreement that says you won't do anything with this.
Yeah.
So
The,
then it
the,
kind of removes the concern.
the other pushback that I hear often is, well, we've spent so much time on this underwriting model. I don't want to just earn money. I don't want to just send it out to people. I don't know. I just wondered your thoughts, because I hear that often as well.
Yeah, I think that's a bit misplaced.
Or maybe they send like PDFs instead or something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's all the things that they tend to do. I guess I just don't know if I buy it. I mean, I think that yeah, you did spend a lot of money. Those are tools that you have, but once again, if they're under NDA, I just don't think that it holds water, in my opinion. It's yeah, but you did spend a lot of money on it, but it's a tool that you use to do your job. And yeah, if somebody else somehow gets a hold of that and uses it, but it's already happening, right? Like that's already all over the place. You can do a Google search and get a model for I mean, as we speak, I literally have a text message that's asking, do you have a model on a hotel construction? I mean, like it's going to happen. And so it's for my whole thing is just like, you can't stop that. So that one little act isn't going to, it's not going to make a difference, right?
Yeah.
If it's going to get out, it's going to get out. I just think we're spending time on the wrong things, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great answer. Like we're spending way too much thought process on that. There's no telling how many different models I have, that have been shared over the years, as well. I mean, it's just, anyway. What about other examples, Lance, of just like removing this friction, or ways that you've seen, just the best practices there, like, between the GP LPs, or whether it's communication, or whether it's something deal specific or structure or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other big one is just around the fact that the pressure on the GP side to sort of, get a little bit more aggressive on their underwriting because everyone else is doing it, right? So it's just, if it's not spitting out an 18 IRR or 20 IRR, they're just so fearful that that their deal will just be passed by LPs just on that basis. I kind of use the analogy of it's kind of like what happened in baseball with steroids is just, if everyone's on steroids and, your livelihood depends upon getting that next contract, you've got a tough decision to make, and they're not policing it, right? Then you're like, I got to go on steroids. Well, I think it's just a bit of the same. It's just like the fact that it's stopping them from being able to, have their own livelihood from the GP standpoint. They're kind of like, well, let's just kind of manipulate that cap rate a little bit. Let's just do whatever we can to kind of push it up, and just not feeling comfortable to defend that. So, I mean, on the LP side, I'd say, listen, this is why you can't do that, right? Like you need to dive in a little bit deeper to understand all the dynamics before you're just going to look on the surface at an IRR and decide whether you're going to, pass on the deals that are less than 15. And it's not that simple. Right. And so, and yes, we all had a great run there for 6, 7, 8 years where it was amazing. I mean, that's what happens when money's basically free, cheap debt. Right. So, but that's not realistic today. Right. And so it's just it's just completely different. So you can't do that. But on the flip side, that's where I'd say GPs, like, you have to be able to defend that. And a lot of it is that you can defend it with your past actions. You can show, here was the pro forma on this deal we did. You'll see that we pro forma this thing at 13.4 IRR, and we ended up realizing an 18, right? And I can show you 12 different instances where we did that, and just have enough courage to find another way to overcome that objection, because we have to both sides have to work together to kind of become more realistic about what we're dealing with.
Under promise
You
and
know,
over deliver.
yeah, if everyone did that, then we wouldn't have any issues. But I think, unfortunately, it's just we see other guys doing it, so we think that we've got to kind of
There's
puff up.
pressure. Yeah, no doubt about it. And I would rather, someone invest with us because we are being conservative versus because we're showing a 25 IRR, and I think too, if an investor, I shared this with you before, but if they're not going to invest with us because we're not showing a high enough IRR, 25%, whatever it is, something really way up there, then they're probably just not our investor. I'd rather our underwriting be conservative and be honest. I just, and not shy away from that.
I agree. I mean, in the other patch, and I've had this discussion with plenty of GPs, it's like, put forth the pro forma that you considered the conservative version. Like, listen, this is what we think we can hit and over deliver on. And here's our stretch, right? Like, if you absolutely have got to see what you think our stretch is, then I'll show you our stretch, right? Like, here's what we're shooting for, and here's what our stretch is. I mean, this is what we would be thrilled and would just all celebrate if we hit this number. If it's that important to you, then we can do that. But I want you to see how easily I can manipulate these. I mean, that's the crux of the matter. You can see how easily I can manipulate this. I can change rent growth, 0.5%. I can change just a handful of these things, and you see the sensitivity of the IRR. And it's nice to have those sensitivity analysis in your stuff. So all those sorts of things, but it's educational around. Like, education has to be taking place. And that's where I think when you're not being transparent, then that means that you're trying to keep the current state where there's a lot of ignorance on the other side. We're better off like educating so that these people become more savvy and more sophisticated, LPs, that is. Right. And so that's a good thing. And I think that's what it will take for this industry to continue to grow and flourish, is just more meaningful educational content on the LP side, so that they actually, become more savvy and sophisticated.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is something we're striving to do better at all the time. I feel like is like better educational content for LPs, and yeah, they're just going to make wiser decisions financially, right? And better investments, and maybe avoid investments, right, as well, that they shouldn't. Well, Lance, let's transition a little bit. I ask anybody with experience like yourself, and listeners always ask, people are asking me all the time, like, just your prediction, right, over the next 18 months, anything like that you would share. And I say, nobody has a crystal ball. However, what you believe is going to happen affects what you're doing, right? And so I just, any insights, any thoughts on what you expect over the next, little bit in the real estate industry?
Yeah. Yeah. So my sense is that, there's going to be quite a bit of fallout from, the situation that we're in, specifically in commercial real estate. I think it's going to materialize over, 2 or 3 years. It's going to take a lot longer than people think. right? There's just not going to be one day we wake up and there's just, complete blood on the streets and, madness. But it's not going to be pretty, right? Because there's a lot of, with a lot of lenders and banks, they've got a lot of distress that's sitting on in their portfolios. So, that's not going to be, it's going to be bad news for a lot of people who are invested in deals that were, acquired in 2021, 2022, which isn't great. Is kind of a bit of a black eye on the business, but like always, I mean, real estate cycles. So what it also means there's gonna be tremendous opportunity. Um, there's going to be people who lose a lot of capital, but there's going to be assets that come back into the market that will be, the prices will be reset and someone else will be able to step in and execute their business plan and, and find lots of success. I mean, we kind of saw this happen, right, with single family in the early 2010s. That's sort of how it played out. It all took a lot longer than people thought, right, for the distress to sort of materialize and hit the markets, because lenders are basically just holding on for dear life. They're kicking the can down the road. Everyone's going to kind of do that.
So are the operators, right?
And so are the operators. I mean, everyone's fighting to hold on as long as they can. And so, which part of it will be where it probably won't be too systemic, right? Because of that, everyone's going to hold on as long as they can. It's going to draw it out much longer. But in the same with interest rates, I just think that they're just not going to fall as fast as we hope, and they won't go as low as we'd all like them to go. I mean, I'm not in that category. I think that that's the problem, is that we just can't keep doing this guardrail to guardrail on rates. We just need to settle in where it's like the prime rate's at between 3 and 4.75 or something like that. It just, I mean, there's proof that when the rates are in that band, everything just seems to work more efficiently. So, but that's kind of what I expect to see. It's going to be very interesting. Yeah, and it's going to be hard on a lot of people, but I think it's going to create lots of opportunities for others.
If they would just give you the dial to control that, so you could just take care of what the interest rate is. I'm just kidding, Lance.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll send that to you. So you can just take care of that for us.
There's those are the jobs I don't want,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, for sure. What's your best source from meeting new investors right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us with the passive advantage side, it's because of, Dr. Sam Giordano. Like, I mean, it's just coming from doctors, and I mean, that's where we're kind of tilting up a masterclass series that kind of goes down a fewer clicks, and I think that's just where most of our, new people that are signing up into our newsletter are coming from, is just word of mouth. I mean, that's right. You can see that's where my passion lies. It's just, I don't believe that people aren't smart enough to learn this stuff. And I'm not afraid to talk about things that are more complicated, even if they're overwhelmed. First of all, I'm incapable of doing it any other way. It's just, I just have to talk about the nitty-gritty details, but I'm excited about that. I'm excited to go deeper with LPs and teach them, more advanced stuff. I just, if I understand it and know it, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. There's no reason why they can't understand it, like, so that's not a good reason to not teach people things because they don't know it. Like, that's foolish.
That's why they don't know
Right?
it. Nobody's taught it, I guess. They haven't learned it yet. So
Yeah, exactly. So that just doesn't make any sense.
What's your best advice for LPs or passive investors right now?
You need to be realistic, but I just think it's knowing who you're dealing with. I mean, it's the same stuff everyone says, but they say it and then they don't do it. So all the stuff we've mentioned here, I think that those are things as an LP that you should have right to have access to, and know who you're dealing with, and, trust but verify, as Reagan had said, like, I believe in that. And I think if you do that, you'll make better decisions. And I think that's what it's about. When you got to realize that you are an investor, right? Even if you're in the beginning of your journey, you're an investor. We're all investors. And I think it's until that clicks in our minds that we're investors. We make money, we save money, we put money into retirement accounts. That makes us an investor. And we're putting that capital into work in something. So you got to start acting like an investor, but that's a mindset thing. First and foremost is that if you're financially illiterate today, then you need to become financially literate. And what steps do you need to take to become literate? You need to learn, you need to read, you need to consume things, you need to think about things, you need to do those things, and you can't abdicate that responsibility to somebody else. And if you've got a wealth manager, it's great, but you can't completely abdicate that responsibility to another person. It's your money, and even now, that's what I'm saying. Like if you invested in deals that went sideways, I, that pains me. I hate to see that, but it's just, this is what kind of shows that it's your responsibility, it's your money, it's your decision. And the right answer is not just to not do anything, right? It's more to be more educated and just to make the best decisions you can make with the information that you have.
What about some habits you're disciplined about that have proven success for you?
I mean, the big one is going to bed early and waking up early, right? And I mean, I started doing that years ago. For a long time there, I was getting up at 4:30. I've moved it to 5, but I just think like that makes the world of difference for me because, and I'm a big fan of Atomic Habits, that book. If you haven't checked it out, I suggest you do. But, like your ability just to habit stack, right? Just step one is like, how do I get up at 5? Right. And then you get that down. And then it's like, what's the next thing I'm going to do? Getting that quiet time and reading my Bible and, just, I mean, I don't think I could function if I didn't have that, right? Like you take that away from me now, I'd be a mess. I'd just be an absolute mess.
Could not agree with you more. It changed my life when I started getting up early and having a plan for my morning routine. It's crucial. Anyway, I know what I'm going to be doing like every 15 minutes of my morning. So,
Yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah. I've got appointments on there. It's like, God and Lance, like, and it comes up and okay, now it's time to do that.
Yeah,
Like it, I mean, now I live, I'm a bit of a drone here. I just live whatever the calendar tells me I'm going to do, I do. And some of this was just driven by my wife and I have 5 children and they were all, pretty close in age. So like it was a necessity back in the day. Like you get no quiet time if you didn't do it. But
that's
now they're a
right.
bit older. But yeah, that's
Yeah, I can
probably what
relate
I.
to that. No, for sure. What about how do you like to give back?
Yeah, my big thing is just right now I'm on this kick, like discipleship is, and I'm kind of running my own family through it, but I just believe that like there's a bit of a missing part. Like we've gotten really good at sort of getting people to, accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. And, the part we just haven't done as great a job at is just like getting, like actually helping people follow Jesus better, right? Like, and I just think back to specifically, right? Like, Jesus' main mission was to train 12 random guys, right? On how basically to start the church. So when you think about it, his mission was discipleship. But when I look at what we do, and I'm looking no further than myself, I just got to be I have to be better at helping people on their walk. And so I just think there's no better thing to put your effort and energy into. And obviously I have passion for it, but just helping people, hey, great, you've accepted Jesus, you've been baptized, you've done those things, but hey, now it's time to, you know, how do you do this thing? Because it's the decision you've made is a great decision, the biggest decision in your life, but ultimately, we've got a mission here while we're here, and it's to love others as we love ourselves, right? But we've got to go out, and that's active. But it's just the same stuff we're talking about here with financial literacy. If people are financially illiterate, then they need to be taught, they need to be trained. And it's the
Mentored.
same thing
Yeah.
with this. Like you need to be mentored, you need to be discipled. We shouldn't just expect that people will figure it out on their own. And there's forces that are against them, the daily lives and all this stuff going on. You need to learn how to do that. It's something that you
Yeah.
learn. It's a skill that you develop.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
I
just
could not agree with you more, Lance. And it makes me think about it's probably been a year ago or so. Well, I sought out another mentor in my life, but it was while my wife and I were raised in church. We weren't believers. We didn't know Jesus as our Savior until later in life, unfortunately. But thank the Lord, that He did save us. But I noticed many years later, after I realized the value of mentorship, right, in my a business, real estate business, even speaking coach, and like all these different areas. I'm like, no, I need to find somebody that's been doing that and let them help me minimize this learning curve, right? And then I thought, wait a minute, why haven't I done that in the most important area of my life?
yeah,
Spiritually, right? And so I did. I sought out my pastor and said, hey, I would really love to like have just some mentoring. I wasn't raised to think this way or to do these things, or it's like even just studying your Bible, like somebody that's been doing it a long time can help you do better, like maximize your Bible time in the morning, right? And so anyway, I love that you brought that up, and And just the focus there on, hey, we need mentoring spiritually as much as anything as well, and seeking that out. Anyway, I'm all on board with you saying that, but I'm grateful for your time with us today. Grateful for us jumping into eliminating this friction between the GP and LPs, right? I think we talk about it weekly as a team. I think like ways that we can do that, and trying to do that well. And so I'm grateful for your desire there, and even bringing out some very good examples that I think operators can take right now and improve on, that you mentioned from the show. And even LPs, as they listen, hey, they could be asking their GPs about these things, and hopefully then they're, if they haven't done it yet, they're thinking about how they could, put these things in place that you mentioned today as well. And they're going to be a better operator because of it, I'm confident. And LPs are going to be better off as well. So grateful for your time, Lance. Grateful you're going to be hosting some shows and bringing your skills and experience to the listeners, and some great guests also. So thank you again.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I'm super excited to help out and to get to be part of the show, and super thrilled.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.